Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about US planes in Broken Arrow. Now, I've already done a video on the subject of which I consider to be the 5 best planes in America's arsenal in the game, but let's talk about every single plane that does exist in the game. Starting with the USMC, with the Harrier. So we have the Harrier II, we have the night attack version. Beyond armament choices, the key differences between the Harrier II, or the key difference between the Harrier II and the night attack, is that the Harrier II has a 12,000 high altitude range. The low altitude range is the same on both of them. Otherwise, same maneuverability on them, just differences in loadout. So same speed, same maneuverability. These are maneuverable planes, so they have pretty good agility. They're some of the most agile planes, or some of the most maneuverable planes that America has, with the exception of the F-16. Like, there are some things that can compare, like the F-117 for special forces, if we do consider that. But otherwise, when we're looking at these planes, they're some of the more agile ones, with again the exception of F-16s being, the big one. That can be an advantage, especially if you're dealing with helicopters, or slower planes, really. So, here's my view on it. The Harrier II can get a gun and an ECM pod, or a designation pod if you want that. That means it can avoid getting hit by missiles because of that ECM, those electronic countermeasures. And it's not really inexpensive. Even if you don't care about the gun at all, and there's reasons you might care about it, you can still get an ECM pod for 20 points. That's pretty cheap, all things considered. Outside of that, you can get AMRAAMs, Mavericks, fuel tanks, or you can get Sidewinders, bombs, or sidearms. Sidearms being anti-radiation missiles, so they're meant to deal with air defenses. They're not the best. They don't have the best penetration, they don't have the best capability. Harm missiles are going to be better. So, but my perspective personally on the subject of the Harrier II, the best way to probably use it is not to drop bombs on an opponent. It's rather to use them to hunt down enemy helicopters. Get a couple of sidewinders on these, 4 in total. Get fuel tanks, right? Or even put AMRAAMs on it if you want to have that longer range capability if any enemy plane shows up. Just have something to throw at them if you want to, and just go hunting for helicopters. The fuel tanks will greatly extend the loiter time, so you probably would want to go with that. Sidewinders, just get 4 of them and go hunting for enemy helicopters. In fact, in the campaign mission where you're defending an amphibious assault ship, you are given Harriers and specifically told to use them to take out an enemy chopper. So that's one of the value propositions of the Harrier. You can use them in multiple ways, of course, if you want to, dropping bombs, etc. Though, personally, on the subject of dropping bombs, I am not fond of the idea of installing bombs on a plane where that's designed for other things. To be certain, though, on a Harrier, you could just install bombs if you want to, like JDAMs. You can just install a bunch of them and have them available to drop, but it can be a bit expensive. Still, it is flexibility, and it's true flexibility. It's the kind of flexibility where, okay, I want a plane for a specific role to do a specific job. I don't want it for anything else. Don't make me spend points on that. Keep in mind that against any real competency on the enemy team, you're probably going to have a situation where any plane that's dropping bombs or doing a strafing run or anything like that is probably going to be shot down. But it can deliver the bombs. A slow plane, but one that flies at low altitude, but with ECM, might not be the best one in a number of ways. Might be able to escape, though it may not have the speed to unmatch it. I do think it's kind of a bit voiced, considering how good these things can be at dealing with enemy helicopters, just because they fly low, they fly slow, but they have great maneuverabilities. I think that's the best way to use them, but you can use them in multiple ways. That's up to you. Then we have night attack. So night attack is more dedicated to ground attack. You don't have ECM pods, unfortunately, but you do have guns. and you can install a bunch of these high drag bombs. Now, my problem here is the fact that a lot of these weapons are not necessarily going to have the best penetration capability. So when you're talking about ground attack, where is it worth using a plane that's 200 points, let's say? Well, armored vehicles, really. So we're talking IFVs, we're talking APCs, we're talking tanks. Well, it might not kill a tank. It might cause damage, of course, which might be worth it. But is it really worth bringing a 200-point plane if you're not going to be able to kill a single proper tank? Sure, there's cheaper tanks, all things, there's lighter vehicles, but, you know, clumps of infantry, like a competent player is not going to clump their stuff up. Someone that doesn't care, one way or another, might blob things up, and it can be useful having the capability of just blowing it up, or it can be useful to send the plane on a suicide run to try and take down the enemy air defenses with bombs, because your cruise missiles might not get the job done. That's a different discussion. Or take that chance on artillery. Even if you spend more points than they lose, you're still eliminating critical capability. Though it's worth keeping in mind, planes take a while to replenish, quite a bit. So bear in mind, sacrificing your planes to complete a mission may mean a loss of capability for a longer time. Still, you do have that flexibility with Harriers because you do have the two versions, so you can have one to hunt down helicopters, other one to hunt down ground targets. That's one way of viewing it. Then we have the EA6B Prowler, the only dedicated electronic warfare plane in the entire game, actually. It's weird we don't have the Prowlers, but okay. We have the Growlers, but we do have the Prowlers. There's multiple ways you can use the Prowlers. So the main way would be to install HARM missiles. They do have ECM built in. HARM, you can give each of them 4 HARM missiles. Or what you could do is install ECM pods on it. And just use that. You go with 2 HARM missiles. Or something that some people have been doing, which is just don't install any weapon. It's very cheap. It's still going to take a while to replenish in your arsenal. But what you can do is just send one EA6B Prowler with ECM, with fuel tanks, and just have it loiter around soaking up enemy missiles. It will die. Don't get me wrong. It will die. But then you bring your real strike plane to do it at the same time. See, suppression of air defenses is just that. Not destruction of air defenses, but suppression. Or basically distraction, not destruction. So if you can keep the enemy air defenses focused on your plane and shooting their missiles, maybe even running out of ammo, then you can launch a strike mission where you actually need it. Pretty good option there. Because the enemy is not necessarily going to know what they're dealing with right there with regards to any EA6B Prowler. There's always that discussion, that contest with regards to air defenses. Then we have the F-15C Hornet. So with the F-18, we do have great air-to-air capability. Some air-to-ground capability, but I think that's a waste of a good plane that has just really good air-to-air capability at a relatively cheap price. So you have AMRAAMs, you have Sparrows, you have gunslinger missiles, you even have Sidewinders. If you want that, you actually start inherently with Sidewinders. Now, there's a couple of benefits. Beyond the fact that the gunslinger missile is long range, can be very effective, but you have 3 different types of missiles that you can install on this. And you could go cheaper if you want to, right? You could certainly cheapen it out and all that. Does depend on the cost analysis, like is it worth installing a lot of air-to-air missiles? Generally, I think it is, because you really don't want to lose an air battle just because you saved up on 20 points, right? With a plane that's still going to be 300 points anyway. But the benefit here is you do have multiple types of missiles that a plane will use. So it's going to use the AMRAAMs, it's going to use the gunslingers, it's just going to be able to do a significant amount of damage in a battle with all of the missiles that it is carrying. So that's my personal way of viewing the F-18C. As for D, it's an air-to-ground plane, primarily. You do have the capability of bringing some AMRAAMs. You do have Sidewinders built in. But really, the primary value proposition over here with the D is air-to-ground. You do have the Rockeye bomb. So high drag bomb, decent amount of penetration capability, can bring a decent amount of them. So you can bring 8 of these. Can be 300 points, can escape from it. Not the best maneuverability, but it can fulfill that role if you wanted to. You can also bring a designation pod. You can bring Maverick missiles. I think Maverick missiles might be better on a slower plane, so Harrier or A10C, a Thunderbolt. Then we have the F-35B. The F-35B has multi-role capability. Though I think maybe the better way of using it would be to just go with the AMRAAMs, because you'll have 2 by default, so you can install more if you want to. You can install bombs, though I don't think, whether or not you're gonna be able to win an air battle and then drop bombs, I think that's a bit sketchy as a proposition. You could do so, but it's very, very cheap as a plane. You just have 4 AMRAAMs to 265 points on a stealth plane. That has pretty good capability. All things considered. Still, respawn times and all that on planes, worth considering that, but I think if you're going to use the F-35B, you could use it for ground attack, but I think the primary value proposition here is, and it can do decent enough with ground attack because of its stealth protecting it, but you're just not going to have, but one, that's going to make the plane much more expensive, and you just don't have the ammunition necessarily to do the amount of damage that you might want. Like, volume of firepower does matter when you're doing air-to-ground. Air-to-air, it's a bit of a discussion on the subject, on how many missiles you want to have, but keep in mind, missiles may be cheaper than bombs. Worth pointing out. Then we have the KC-130J Harvest Hawk. Transport plane, kind of a bit worthless, though. The Marines only have the Marine Raiders as airborne troops. Otherwise, you kind of have airborne troops in specializations that have their own planes, so feels a bit worthless. I mean, okay, there's maybe some other things you can drop, but, I'm just going to say it. I don't think the Marines needed a transport plane. That's just my perspective. I mean, when you consider, the fact that you do have airborne infantry with the C-130, right? So I'm just kind of wondering, it could be used as a gunship if you install some Hellfire missiles, like Griffin missiles, but people have reported issues with regards to that, so keep that particular aspect in mind. But I guess that is a way you could use the KC-130. Airborne infantry, the Venerable Thunderbolt, the Warthog, the A10C Thunderbolt II. You've got a bunch of things. It's kind of a bit unfortunate, though, that you can't just stack a ludicrous number of bombs on this thing, or missiles. I mean, you can get a good amount of Maverick missiles, but maybe it would be nicer if we could just install even more stuff on it. As it stands, it's kind of a question okay, you can get Maverick missiles, you can get cluster bombs if you want to. You can get regular bombs, designation pod, ECM, or some air-to-air missiles. Though I think that's a bit of a waste on Thunderbolt. But maybe, some helicopter capability like 4 Sidewinders could be useful sometimes. Just using it to hunt it down, or ECM pod plus some Sidewinders. But primarily, I think the value of the A10 Thunderbolt is air-to-ground role, using Maverick missiles in particular to hunt down tanks if you do detect them, or dropping cluster bombs, or both if you want to. So that's going to be sketchy. You can get it fairly cheap. If you just want to drop a bunch of bombs on a target, just remove the Mavericks, 215 points for that kind of capability. And, if you just want to install an ECM pod or 2 ECM pods, still going to be relatively cheap. And it's going to do a decent amount of damage on an enemy. Then we have the B-1B Lancer. Now, the B-1B Lancer can carry a lot of stuff. If you really want to blow a place up on the map, this is the plane for it. So you've got a lot of smaller bombs with lower penetration. You got bigger bombs with higher penetrations. You got smart bombs. You got Mark 84s. And then you have cruise missiles and a tactical nuke. Here's my perspective. The B-1B is great for two things. One, it has afterburners. Two, it can drop altitude. So you can do low-level bombing runs at high speed. It is pretty damn fast as a plane once you, as a big plane, once you do engage those afterburners. What I personally prefer to do is using the ALCMs. These are cruise missiles. They do a decent amount of damage. They can kill a good amount of things. It's only 8, but let me say this. Microing 24 JSSMs, it might be only 200 points, but believe me, you'll feel that. On top of that, the reason I prefer using cruise missiles, so, you know, being able to actually launch all 8 of these ALCMs, because an enemy will, even if you keep it far on your side and just fire from there, the enemy can still take it out. There's multiple ways of doing so. So you kind of want to fire a bunch of things and get the heck out of there. And that's the value with the ALCMs. Just fire all 8 of them in quick succession, mark targets, shoot them, and and then get out. Drop altitude the moment you spawn it, fire, get out, right? I mean, if you want to risk it, you can just stick around and fire as many JSSMs as you want. Just keep in mind the plane micro required for that and the vulnerabilities that come with it. Also, strategic bombers do take a long fucking time to respawn. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like using strategic bombers to drop bombs. Because you can have a lot of bombs, but it might be an overkill capability. Like, you can kill a lot of people if they're all concentrated in an area, but how often are you going to encounter that situation in a match where you actually stand a chance? Not where 3 of your teammates out left, but where you're actually fighting against the proper opponent. That's my perspective on it. But regardless, it does have that bombing capability, cruise missile capability. C-130, transport plane, most basic really, transport plane. But then we have the C-17 Globemaster. Now, the C-17 is expensive as a transport plane. It's also the best transport plane that Americans do have. It's a question of speed, so it's faster. It can fly at low altitude. It can carry a lot of things, including, if we do consider the vehicle pool that is available for airborne infantry, which the C-17 is part of, you can carry 4 M1 AGSs or 4 M8 Thunderbolts. These are pretty good light tanks. You can carry all 4 of them and drop them on an enemy point. They don't have great survivability, so be careful of that. But imagine dropping a whole lot of shit behind enemy lines. That's one of the things. You don't need to drop on points. You could just sneak a plane around behind the enemy line, and then suddenly, oh shit, a bunch of tanks have just dropped behind my lines. That's pretty crazy. And it can do it. Just to be clear, it might not survive, but it does have electronic countermeasures. It does have better speed. It can carry a lot of stuff. Be careful how you put all the eggs in your basket. Might be worth having a teammate doing a SEAD mission at the same time, or some level of distraction against enemy air defenses. But a drop of a C-17 is quite something. Then we have the F-15s, the F-15 Eagle, Strike Eagle, and EX Eagle II. So the Sea Eagle is primarily, or really, just air-to-air. So it's got AMRAAM, sidewinders, all that. Decent enough, not the best capability, but still you will have a decent number of sidewinders and AMRAAMs that you can use. It gets the job done. No complaints on that subject. Like, you can still bring a good amount of firepower over here. Strike Eagle, mainly air-to-ground capability. It's got a bunch of bombs that it can install, and this is really a bomb truck. Like, when you look at the situation, like the amount of hydrak bombs you can bring on this will level an area. You want to talk about a true strategic bomber? Like, yes, you might have 30 CBUs, right? But keep in mind the time that it takes to respawn the plane. So bear that in mind, because it's not just the cost of the plane. Also, a bigger plane, bigger target, easier to see. Kind of not the best thing for that specific role. And also the F-15 Strike Eagle is just, faster and more maneuverable. So, if I'm doing... so I think, like, 12 high drag bombs, it's decent enough from my perspective. Even though I'm personally not a big fan of dropping bombs for a number of reasons, but you do have a huge level of freaking firepower you can install on it. Or you can decide not to. You might think, okay, maybe 12 is too much. Let's just reduce it, be calm, be chill, just still bring a lot of them, but smaller bombs, right? Cheaper. If we want to. Or GPUs if you want to. But yeah, I think like it is a ridiculous level of firepower, only in America. Really, can do a good amount of damage, bit costly. Then we have the EX Eagle II. The EX Eagle is fucking ridiculous on every level you can think of. Air to air, air to ground, this thing is just insane. So let's consider what it can do in terms of air to ground. You can bring in a bunch of JSSMs, right? It's a pretty decent amount, I'm not gonna lie, on this, right? And then you inherently will have some air-to-air missiles on it. You have to take something, right? And the cheapest option is 4 AMRAAMs. Again, I'm not really big on this. It's pretty damn expensive to do so. But you're going to have a heck of a decent amount of firepower. And from my understanding, fighter planes do respond faster than, strategic bombers. So that's one thing to consider with it. You might lose it more often. But if you're going to do a cruise missile strike, like typically speaking, you're not going to lose a plane in a cruise missile strike. It depends on the distance you're talking about, but it's easier to kind of micro an F-15 with just a couple of bombs, just drop them off. Maybe loiter way back to see if an enemy plane is going to come up and just hit them with AMRAAMs. If you want to spend 545 points, you'll get a lot of those back if you return to base after doing the cruise missile strike. So there's a lot of versatility on the EX Eagle II. You can just install a ridiculous amount of crap on this thing. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, the sheer amount of AMRAAMs, sidewinders, fuel tanks. Like, you can have a plane that's loitering around for a long time with a lot of missiles to be able to use. You can have a plane with good air-to-ground capability. I really think the EX Eagle II is flat out the best plane in the game by quite a bit in a lot of different ways. At least as a fighter, right? Like, I really like the C-17, but the EX Eagle II just wins out in so many ways. Then we have the B-52H Stratofortress. Kind of the worthless one. I'm not gonna lie on that. I mean, yeah, you can install a bunch of cruise missiles, but it's a lot more vulnerable than a B-1B Lancer in a lot of different ways. I mean, it's not a question of speed, right? It's just having to micro that many missiles, the cost of the damn thing. Like, you look at, a B-1B Lancer with a couple of them is just going to be cheaper. You can go with bombs and all that. I'll be honest. Sending a B-52 on a bombing run, unless you've really suppressed enemy air defenses, is a bit questionable. I would say that the only reason you would use a B-52 in your deck is if you don't have anything better, really. Like, let's say you go Striker Cav Armored Brigade and you just want the plane with a lot of bombs. Of course, we're ignoring the fact that you wouldn't have air-to-air air defense, or air-to-air capability in that situation. And I think people need to understand they need to pay their air tax. Ground defenses are not enough. I've seen so many teams in so many games just get screwed over because people didn't pay their air tax. I know, it's not pleasant. But it has to be done because you might get away with it sometimes. But it's not a great idea. So my point is, generally speaking, I don't think, like, it's very expensive as a plane to begin with. Like, sure, you can cut down the cost in some ways, just have 12 ALCMs, but you've got B-1Bs, you've got B-2 Spirits. I don't think Striker Cav is something you pick for air power. Though, to be fair, the F-16s have their own advantages in that respect. So we have the Fighting Falcon, and ignore the Fighting Falcon part of it. It's not really the best of plane. Like, you've got Maverick, you've got bombs and all that. It's agile, can be decently cost, can drop some stuff on it, but it's kind of soft targets. Then we have the F-16 CJ. The CJ is pretty good because we do have 4 harm missiles on it, and we can go, AMRAAMs, Sidewinder capability. So if you want to, go hunting for certain things after that, or, try and take a shot at some helicopters as a parting gift, or enemy planes if they do try and intercept you, or both if you want to, you can do so. It's pretty effective, pretty fast, pretty agile. Just go in, drop the bombs, get out, pretty much. The Viper, multi-role plane. I'm not really fond of it because it does force you to take certain things that you might otherwise not want to take. And it doesn't have... it has more bombs. It doesn't have cruise missiles. And, yeah, it takes a lot of effort to get it going, right? Basically, that's kind of my thing with some of these things, right? Like guided glide bombs, right? Can be a bit tricky. And some of these perspectives also can be a bit expensive for what is kind of fragile plane, so keep that in mind. I think out of the F-16s, only the CJ is really worth it. You can bring the others for different roles, like air-to-air, if you want that capability. On the Fighting Falcon can be a pretty cheap air-to-air plane. Just bring a bunch of them with AMRAAMs, or a combination of AMRAAMs and Sidewinders can be decent enough in that role. Viper, I just kind of question the value proposition, though. You could install fuel tanks, AMRAAMs, all that, but from air-to-ground capability, you're taking a risk, and it might pay off in some situations, but there's downsides on that. It's just like the cost analysis of firepower versus the risk of you losing the plane doing a drop. That's my issue with it. Like, that's the reason why I like the EX Eagle II. You have great capability on the EX Eagle II, like in terms of the munitions this bloody thing can carry. I just don't feel the same thing with the Viper. AC-130 can be a good distraction plane. You can install a bunch of Hellfires on it, but you really, really do need suppression of air defenses to really do damage. On the flip side, you could use an AC-130 as something to soak a number of missile hits. It's 160 points, for the record, and it's not something an enemy team can ignore, because an AC-130 is going to do a lot of damage if you just fucking ignore it. Like, it's a flying artillery piece, because America. So an enemy team can't ignore it. They're going to have to expend effort to shoot it down. So if you want to do a strike mission, you can just send in an AC-130 first. Or if you have suppressed enemy air defenses, which is a questionable proposition, you might just send one packed to the teeth with Hellfire missiles and Griffin missiles to, try and do a decent amount of damage, though it's obviously going to be more expensive. B-2 Spirit. If you want an entire area of the map erased, this is the plane for you. Tactical nuclear missile. And, there's pros and cons with having a bomb versus cruise missile as a tactical nuclear weapon. There's advantages and disadvantages, but the thing is, the B-2 Spirit, usually, for the most part, is going to be able to get anything it wants on target. Whether or not it survives the bombing run is a different discussion, so it's a cost analysis. But it's not necessarily the only way you can use it. You do have different bombs, munitions, all that. From my personal perspective, like, if I'm not using a tactical nuke, I'm bringing it with 16 JSSMs. And the thing about it, due to its stealth profile, while it's costly, all that, its stealth profile does a lot to protect it from enemy air attack. So that can be useful to, strategic bombers. They do take a while, they do take longer than fighters to get back into the field, the point cost, etc. And you might just be wasting stuff. Like, it depends on how you use it, right? How often are you really going to be able to reliably hit 16 targets? I've played a lot of cruise missiles. You might expend a good amount of enemy ammunition. You probably will kill some stuff. But it is effective. Just keep in mind there's also an overkill potential. Tactical nuke can swing the tide of the battle and might cause some rage quitting though. Then we have the F-117 Nighthawk. What I do like about the Nighthawk, it's air-to-ground combat capability. But here's what I like about the Nighthawk as a plane. So, even at the most expensive, it's only 300 points. And this is the kind of plane that while it may not carry a lot of munitions, one, it can be cheap. First off, so you're not really feeling you're paying a stealth tax with this, though it has a good stealth profile. Its speed may not necessarily be the best. But one of the things I really like about the Nighthawk, it respawns faster. So it's available, like you do a mission, you pull it out, you get a decent amount of points back for it, right? But more importantly on the subject is you can spawn in a bunch of Nighthawks, fire 2 JSSMs, or 4, because you can get 2 of these max. You get 4 of these cruise missiles, you fire them, you bugger off, and there's nothing the enemy can do to stop your plane from getting out. Like, I've done a bunch of cruise missile operations and bombing runs in the matches I've played of Broken Arrow. Sometimes you get away with saving your planes. A lot of times you might lose stuff, enemy interceptions. Because the Nighthawk just only has a couple of munitions, it's very easy to just do that strike mission. It's long range. You can use it in a defensive role and an offensive role. Many times the enemy air defenses are going to intercept it, undeniably so. But it is that kind of safety. So I think like the F-117 is really good from our perspective. Though, if I'm running airborne and special operations forces, I'm bringing both the B2 and their B1. Because that's just the kind of guy I am. Then we have the F-22. The F-22 is a great fighter. You can install AMRAAMs on it if you want to. But you can also install the JATM. Now, here's the thing about the AIM-260. It's not the best air-to-air missile to use against enemy fighters. However, if you're dealing with enemy cargo planes, if you're dealing with enemy bombers, the AIM-260 is the weapon of use. Because while it doesn't have the speed of the AMRAAM, which, I know, game balance issues, the reason its long range means that it can kill a strategic bomber or a transport plane before they actually deliver their payload. And that's the benefit of the F-22. It can do, obviously, with JATMs, it can do air-to-air against enemy fighters. It's going to be pretty decent at that capability, undeniably so. And you are obviously going to have, when we look at, we do have some JATMs, we do have some AMRAAMs. Pretty good plane overall. But just 4 of these JATMs, these AIM-260s, that's the primary role I would assign to the F-22. Then we have the F-35A. So here's my perspective on the F-35A. You could, if you really wanted to, use it for air-to-air combat. I think when you're looking at special operations forces and you have the F-22 on hand, that's kind of a waste of a plane. There's 2 things I would use the F-35 for. One, you could kind of use it in the same way as the F-117, except the F-117 doesn't require you to pay the same stealth tax that the F-35 does. It just has the F-117 has the greater capacity. One of the benefits, though, with the F-35 is that you can have harm missiles on a stealth plane. It won't be the most, but it's still 310 points, and it's a capability that you might be lacking in certain ways. Like the EX Eagle II has the ability of installing harms, but it's only 2 of them. It's kind of a waste of a plane in that respect. You will have some AMRAAMs, so it's not completely useless against air-to-air targets, so you do have some of that capability. But you can bring a decent amount of F-35s. That's kind of one of the things worth pointing out about a lot of planes, like just the limit of how many you can bring. You can bring, like if we look at actual decks, right? Let's go with the 500 first. You're going to bring 4 F-35s. And it won't be the same as, you know, some 2 Prowlers, but there is a benefit in going down that path, if you want to. So I would say, like, that's the value proposition of the F-35, just this, the mass of them that you can bring. And you do have all kinds of options right here. Personally, I use them for SEAD missions. Specifically for decks where I don't have Striker Cav or USMC. Like, if I'm playing USMC or I'm playing Striker Cav, I'll obviously use the CJs and Prowlers because they're just better for that specific role. Just more missiles, right? But the F-35, while it doesn't have the same amount of missiles, it's still a fairly cheap plane. And it does have a bit of multi-role capability inherently built in. So there's some use in that. I don't necessarily like paying the multi-role tax with some of these planes. It's like, you are going to be paying for a missile. I don't like paying the stealth tax on a lot of planes, but the F-35A is decent enough for the role. Then we have the MC-130H. Really, the value proposition of the MC-130H, electronic countermeasure, airborne capability, which is really important for special forces. You might not have a transport plane in every special forces deck, right? And obviously the MC-130 is worth using a lot more than the KC-130, because not having electronic countermeasures on transport plane is just asking to be shot down. So that's one of the benefits of the C-17, the MC-130H, is that level of protection because of ECM. That makes them worth it. Basically, my view on the MC-130, if you got airborne and special forces, yeah, use the C-17. If you don't have special forces with airborne, use the MC-130. Cosine signing out. Stay tuned.